So, good evening, everyone. So today we have a case that 75 a female patient having a class 2 dyspnea and a history of the cardiac syncope once in the last month. So other non-cardiac causes has been ruled out, and she had a history of the whole anterior MI with normal coronaries, and the cardiac MR showing a apical scar with LV ejection fraction of 38%, and the ILR loop recorder shows the VPC burden of 4.5% of total QRS, and ECG is showing the bifascicular block with the prolonged PR with a QRS duration of 120 millisecond. So apart from the medical optimization, what should we offer to her? Whether we should go for a pacemaker considering the underlying bifascicular block and the prolonged AV first degree block in the ECG, or whether we should offer a AICD considering the history of the old MI in the apical scar and the cardiac MR with the LV dysfunction. So I would say that if patient has only LV dysfunction and the cardiac MR showing apical scar with LV dysfunction, definitely we'll go for AICD straightforward. And if patient is only patient is a normal LV ejection fraction with the normal heart, structurally normal heart with the normal cardiac MR, and ECG showing just a bifascicular block with the prolonged AV block and history of the cardiac syncope, then definitely we'll proceed for a permanent pacemaker implantation in this patient. But we have both this condition here. So this particular gray zone, then we have to decide which is a more suitable for this patient. So in this particular patient, I would say that AICD is preferred in this patient because the tachyarrhythmia is the most likely cause of the syncope in this patient. So if we look at the cardiac causes of the syncope, the most common cause is a tachyarrhythmia followed by AV block. It may be because of the low cardiac output hypotension, maybe because of the LVOT obstruction, or it may be a reflex mediated. But before going for any particular device therapy or offering a particular further intervention, we should take a proper history, and the further evaluation is always necessary, and that is almost important. If we look at the history of the syncope, it is really very important whether it was associated with the palpitation. If there is association of the palpitation with the syncope, that would nearly confirm the possibility that patient had a ventricular tachycardia. That was the reason for the syncope. If patient has a sweating, nausea, vomiting or breathlessness, and that may occur because of the hypertension, that may occur in patient with the ventricular tachycardia rather than any post-dilated syncope. So in such cases, if patient has a history of palpitation, nausea, vomiting or sweating at the time of the syncope, then definitely the VT is a more likely cause, and we should offer a AICD to such patients. Now coming to the another important evaluation is a evaluation of the ectopics. Here we have that 14 days loop recorder showed the VPC burden of the 4.5%. Though the percentage of the VPC is not that high, VPC burden is not that high, but we have to look the morphology of the ectopics. If there is a R1T VPCs, presence of couplets or triplets, or there is a presence of multifocal VPCs, then definitely the chances of having a ventricular tachyarrhythmia is a more likely etiology here, and we have to proceed for a AICD rather than a permanent pacemaker. And further evaluation like EP study, the EP study particularly if there is an induction of the ventricular tachycardia by EP, that would nearly confirm the VT as a etiology, and we have to go for AICD. And if we look at the HV interval, if there is a HV interval is more than 60 millisecond, there are more chances that patient may progress to the complete heart block in the future. So that we have to keep in mind as well. But the negative EP study does not rule out the etiology as a VT or AV block as a cause of the syncope. So the positive EP study has a more positive predictive value, but the negative EP will not rule out the VT or AV block as a reason of the syncope. That we have to keep in mind. And other important thing is a ECG characteristics. We are not given a detailed ECG findings here in this particular case, but if you look at the ECG parameters like any QT alternance, T-wave alternance, presence of early repolarizations, and other things like presence of long QT, short QT interval, presence of ECG signs that is suggestive of the Brugada syndrome or suggestive of the ARVD, then definitely such patient have a more chances of having a ventricular tachycardia as a likely cause of the syncope. And another important thing is ILR. The ILR will give a definitely more insight into the etiology of the syncope, but the only problem with the ILR is that it is really costly, and the cost of the ILR, if we put for 14 days or more than that, the cost will be more than even pacemaker implantation. So in this particular patient, in our patient, the possibility here is a ventricular tachycardia because she had a history of the old MI with apical scar and presence of the VPCs. Though the clarity on the type of the VPCs, whether it was NSVT, couplets or triplets, is not given here, the more likely chances that patient has VT is more likely. And second caused maybe a AV block because of the underlying bifascicular block with the prolonged PR interval, and it may be because of drug induced or maybe a hypotension. So this table shows there are various criteria, the presence of which indicates that patient is a very high cardiac risk in presence of the syncope. So which are these criteria? If you look here, presence of the severe structural or the coronary artery disease, for example, heart failure, previous MI, LV obstruction. In our case, there is a presence of the prior old anterior MI with apical scar. So our patient, in presence of the old MI and syncope, it becomes a very high cardiac risk in syncope, and the likelihood of the ventricular tachycardia is more likely. And other things like clinical findings and the ECG findings, like history, the syncope occurring during the exertion, or it is occurring during the supine position, or palpitation at time of the syncope. Is there any family history of the sudden cardiac death? Is there any presence of NSVT in ILR recording, or is there any presence of the bifascicular block with the prolonged QRS duration more than 120 milliseconds? In our patient, the QRS was 120 milliseconds. Or any presence of pre-excited QRS, prolonged QT, short QT, ECG suggestive of the Brugada pattern, or ECG suggestive of the ARVD. So these are the particular ECG sign and the clinical signs in presence of which if there is a syncope, then there are high chances that the patient may have a ventricular tachyarrhythmia as a likely etiology. So if you look at the review of literature based on the history, even a syncope from the arrhythmia is a most common reason, most commonly that occurs from the ventricular tachycardia, which accounts for around 11% of the total cases of the syncope. And on the other way, the bradyarrhythmias are cause of the syncope in just 3 to 10% of the cases. And the association of the ventricular tachycardia with low ejection fraction cannot be overemphasized, and it must be considered in any patient with a poor LV, whatever is the underlying etiology. So whenever there is a poor LV function and presence of the syncope, ventricular tachycardia by default should be considered. So those for this particular patient, as I already mentioned, that the old anterior MI, scar with VPGs and low ejection fraction, chances of VT is higher. As there is underlying RBBB, LASB and prolonged PR, it is not necessarily that AV block with the long pause is a reason for syncope in this particular patient. So not necessarily that just merely a presence of the bifascicular block and prolonged PR is a reason of the syncope. So the overall chances of having a VT is higher than the bradycardia in our patients. So definitely I would offer a AICD. And if you look at the comparison of the AICD and a pacemaker, the AICD can treat both the tachycardia as well as the bradycardia, and it can prevent the sudden cardiac death if the patient has a VT in future. But the permanent pacemaker, it will only treat the bradycardia and cannot prevent the sudden cardiac death if syncope was due to the ventricular tachycardia. Though the AICD is costlier than pacemaker, but we have to be more safer in this patient. So as I already said that in absence of the investigation like EP studies or data on a VPCs and ILR, it is better to be safer to put a AICD rather than a pacemaker, and that will treat a tachycardia and bradycardia both, and pacemaker will only treat a bradycardia. And the next, we never know that if patient has a next episode of the VT, then patient may not survive and patient may have sudden cardiac death, and that will not be prevented by putting a pacemaker. So that can be prevented by offering her AICD. Now if you look at the guidelines for the ICD implantation, it also says that it is a class 1A recommendation to put a AICD as a primary prevention if patient has a LV dysfunction with EF less than 35% with the class 2 symptoms. If EF is less than 30%, even with the class 1 symptoms, AICD is a class 1A indication for as a primary prevention. And in case of ejection fraction is less than 40% with a positive EP finding, if there is an induction of the VT during the EP study or any presence of the NSVT, then is also a class 1 indication when the LV ejection fraction is less than 40%. So definitely in this particular patient, the history and the thorough evaluation in form of the ILR, if possible, EP study is helpful before deciding the device therapy. As I already mentioned that EP findings are not that specific. Positive EP has a more positive predictive value. So the induction of the VT, definitely VT is a etiology, but negative EP will not rule out the VT or the AV block as a reason of the syncope. So to summarize, if there is a structurally abnormal heart, VT is a more likely, then definitely we should offer a AICD. If there is a presence of structurally normal heart, normal LV function, normal cardiac MR, and presence of the AV block in a ECG, then definitely we'll go for a permanent pacemaker. So in our case, because of the all anterior MI, presence of LV dysfunction with apical scar in the cardiac MR, putting a AICD will be a more sensible and a safer option. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm Dr. Raghav from UN Mehta. So coming straight to my talk. So just a few important, my slides are not there. Yeah. So yes. So coming straight to my talk. Regarding the case under discussion, there is a few points which needs to be remembered about this case. This patient is 75-year-old. This is not a usual case, and this patient has a bifascicular block with a very prolonged PR of 240 milliseconds. There is a 14-day ELR which has been done, which reveals a VPC burden of 4.5%, and there is a cardiac syncope, which I suppose that it is cardiac now, so no point going into the reflex syncope pathway. And there is only a small apical scar, and the ejection fraction is 38%. Now going ahead, I am here to speak about DDDR alone shall suffice as of now in this case. So what are the possible causes of the cardiac syncope in this case? So it can be intermittent complete heart block, which seems to be more likely because there is a bifascicular block plus prolonged PR interval denoting the conduction system disease. There are certain VTVF can also be there, but it is less likely because there has been an old anterior wall MI, and with no residual ischemia, coronaries are normal, ejection fraction is more than 35%, is 38%. There is only a small apical scar. There are no high risk features on the Holter, including NSVT runs or a VTVF. But the problem is that VTVF cannot be conclusively ruled out to say that we will not put an ICD. So a pragmatic solution can be EP study, as pointed out before in the previous talk. So we can do a programmed electrical stimulation for a VTVF. If it is inducible, then we can go for an AICD. If there is no inducible VT, we can do a bradycardia study and see the HV interval or inducibility of any high-grade AV block. If it is there, we can go ahead with a dual chamber pacemaker implantation. If the HV is normal and there is nothing, no tachy is induced and there is no high-risk feature for the bradycardia, we can go ahead with an ILR. But the problem, again, as rightly pointed out the previous speaker, is that the negative predictive value of an EP study for both VTVF and for bradycardia is both questionable. So that brings us to the quandary what needs to be done. So to find the answer, let's have a close look at the evidence. What is there in the evidence? Let's review the evidence. So what is the evidence for DDDR in this case? First, we'll discuss about the evidence for the dual chamber pacemaker. So this was, here it is all started. So this was the first study from NEJM in 1982, where patients of bundle branch block was studied, and it was found that patient who had syncope, there was a 17% incidence of heart block against 2% patients who didn't have any syncope, and the risk of heart block and of death from a bradyarrhythmia is usually low. Coming down in the same year in 1982, this is American Journal of Cardiology. It's a landmark paper from Scheinman, which today forms the most of the guidelines. So this paper included 303 patients with chronic bundle branch block and did an EP study for all these patients, divided into three groups: HV of less than 55, HV of 55 to 69, and HV of more than 70 milliseconds. Interestingly, what they found was that the progression to high-grade AV block was rare, only 2% in less than 55 millisecond group, and 4% in group 2 and 12% in group 3. And HV of more than 100 millisecond was particularly high risk with a progression rate of 24%. And in this study, 62 patients had underwent a pacemaker implant. There was no difference in mortality in patients having pacemaker implant or no pacemaker implant, but pacemaker definitely decreased the symptoms. So this is the landmark paper based on which most of the guidelines today exist, and this is the ESC guideline for management of syncope from 2018, which clearly says if there is an ejection fraction of less than 35%, we go ahead with an ICD or CRT. But the problem is if the ejection fraction is more than 35%, we can go for an empiric pacemaker, which is a class 2B indication, or consider an EPS as a class 2A indication, and if nothing is found, we can implant an ILR. But so we have contrary data also available, which makes us confused. So this is a trial which was done published in 2013, the issue trial, where ILR was done in 52 patients with bifascicular block and unexplained syncope and negative EP study. So what surprisingly was found, even after a negative EP study, 42% patients had a syncope recurrence and 17 patients were secondary to high-grade AV block, and additional 3 patients progressed to asymptomatic complete heart block. So negative EP study cannot rule out. And then there was a press study which was published in Circ A&E in 2013. In this study, all these patients bifascicular block with unexplained syncope underwent a pacemaker implant empirically, and these patients were randomized to DDD 60 mode versus a DDI 30 mode. And what they found was that DDI-30 mode had a significant increase of symptoms as compared to DDD-60 mode. So this means that pacemaker implantation in this subgroup conclusively decreases the symptoms of syncope and pre-syncope as compared to no pacemaker implantation, no intervention. So pacemaker implantation was suggested. However, there is no mortality benefit. So as per this study, the last press study, 2017 AHA recommendations are to, it is reasonable to implant a pacemaker in such a patient with chronic biofascicular block and syncope. However, they have failed to give any level of recommendation or level of evidence for this indication. But 2018 guidelines for from the European Society of Cardiology are pretty clear about it, that if you want to implant an ICD, you have to do a EPS before and say that there is inducible VT, and if you want to implant a pacemaker, you have to do an EPS to show that HV is more than 70. If HV is more than 70, it's a class 1 indication. But the problem is this uptake of this guideline, application of this guideline, even in the United States, it's very poor. So this is the data from Medical College Albany in United States of America, which showed that only 10% of the patients with biofascicular block and syncope actually underwent EPS. So what is the reason behind this change of the why these guidelines are not being followed? So basically there has been a resistance to do an EPS because the negative predictive value of EPS is poor. That's why there has been a recent rise in interest in these patients, and recently in 2022 two studies were published. One was the Sprightly trial, which was published in JACC-EP. It was a randomized trial where such patients biofascicular block with undiagnosed syncope were randomized to implantable cardiac monitor or a pacemaker, and it was clearly shown that pacemaker group did better in terms of reduction of symptoms, and many of the patients from the implantable cardiac monitor group actually required to be upgraded to a pacemaker on later follow-up. However, there was no difference in mortality between the two arms. And the other trial, which was published in October 22, was in the heart rhythm. This was a prospective multi-center observational study, and it was a propensity match study in which 89 propensity match pairs were analyzed, and it showed that 39.3% patients who were in the ILR group actually developed significant bradyarrhythmias and recurrent syncope on follow-up. So thus it was suggested empiric PPI reduced syncope recurrence in this set of patients and can be considered. So summary for the evidence for pacemaker implant is that dual chamber pacing for syncope in biofascicular block may be reasonable without EPS even, especially in the elderly where falls can be traumatic. So this statement is specifically written in the European Society of Cardiology that in elderly patients where falls can be traumatic, DDDR implantation in a syncope in biofascicular block can be considered even without an EPS. However, EPS can still be considered indicated and can be done when available. Now coming to the second part of my talk, which is the evidence against the AICD in this case. So what is the evidence of implanting an AICD in such a case? So AICD evidence started from secondary prevention trial. So this was the meta-analysis of the 3 secondary prevention trials which showed effectiveness of AICD implantation, AVID, SIDS and CASH. This was from European Heart Journal in 2000. Even in this meta-analysis, if we look at closely, so what was found in the patients who had ejection fraction of more than 35%, ICD in the secondary prevention, this is secondary prevention data, this is not primary prevention data, mind you. In the secondary prevention data also, ICD was not much effective as compared to amiodarone in the secondary prevention arm in ejection fraction more than 35%, and the lines only diverged after 5 years of follow-up. And the only evidence for implanting ICD in patients of ejection fraction more than 35% comes from a single trial, which is MUST trial. In this trial, patients less than 40% were included only when they had unsustained VT or an unexplained syncope. There was no unsustained VT in this case. Syncope can be explained by the biofascicular block in this case. And importantly, all patients underwent an EPS in this study, and only patients who had EPS positive for inducible monomorphic VT underwent an ICD implantation or antiarrhythmic therapy. And it showed that ICD implantation improved mortality rates in this subgroup who had an inducible VT. So based on this MUST trial, we have the current guidelines from the AHA 2017, which shows that such patients have to undergo an EP study for inducible VT before implanting an ICD. So ICD cannot be directly justified. And similarly, even the European Society of Cardiology guidelines from 2022, which are the latest rendition, it also shows that programmed electrical stimulation is class 1 indication in such subgroup before implanting an ICD. But there is further problem with the benefit of ICD when we look further into the data. So this was a paper in 2005 which shows that in the primary prevention trials, where ICD showed a mortality benefit in patients less than 30 or 35%, it was shown that mortality benefit was majorly driven by patients who were included with ejection fraction less than 20%. As the ejection fraction is more than 20%, the mortality, and as the ejection fraction rises, it is not a linear scale, it is actually a logarithmic scale, and the mortality actually falls logarithmically as compared to a linear scale, what can be expected. So a difference from 30 to 38 is not same as 22 to 30. The other major point is all these trials were done in 1990s and 2000s when our guideline directed medical therapy was not that sophisticated. In today's date, our uptake of GDMT is much better as compared to before, and we have ARNIs and SGLT2 inhibitors making our mortality data much improved as compared to before. With the reduction of mortality in heart failure patients and such patients, the sudden cardiac deaths are also expected to get reduced, thus diminishing benefits of an ICD. So ICD, is it free of troubles? No, it is not. And if we see the cost effective analysis, even in the United States of America from the MADIT2 and the SCUD-HEF trial, the cost per life year saved becomes acceptable only after 5 and 8 years of follow-up, not before that. So a patient should have a significant lifespan available before ICD should be implanted. And ICD has a 10 to 15% definite risk of inappropriate shocks, which can cause severe anxiety and deteriorate the quality of the life of the patient. And ICD is a bigger device, especially in a frail patient with a 75-year-old. It can cause a lot of complication with a bigger device and stouter leads. And the last point in this patient, which is very important, that this patient is already 75-year-old. As per the Indian life expectancy, has already outlived the average life expectancy in India. And what we see that this is the data from which was published in Circulation 2013 from United States of America, Ontario ICD registry, which followed more than 5,400 or more than 5,000 patients. So what was seen that this blue line and this purple line, which are more than 80 years and 70 to 79 years, have a very high mortality on follow-up after ICD implant. And if we see the appropriate shock rate, they are comparatively lower as compared to the younger age group. So the question, if the benefit of ICD in such group is very, very questionable. And in fact, there was a review paper in 2015 Europace, which clearly said that result of ICD trials cannot be extrapolated to this elderly population, and mortality is already high in elderly people because of the too many comorbidities they have, and because of the aging, and evidence for survival benefit is very weak in this population. And ICDs are not cost effective in elderly as a group, and they can be considered only when estimated life expectancy is more than 7 years of age. So this is pretty strong evidence against implanting ICD in this case. And syncope not unexplained in this case because it may be likely due to intermittent AV block. There is no evidence of NSVT on 14-day Holter. VTVF thus is unlikely. For primary prevention, minimal benefit of ICD at ejection fraction of 38%, and with guideline directed medical therapy in today's date, there is diminishing benefit of ICD for primary prevention, and at age of 75 years, ICD has completely controversial benefit. Thus, costs and risks of ICD implantation in this case versus a dual chamber implantation cannot be justified in this given case scenario. Thus, DDDR alone shall suffice as of now, and I rest my case here.